Good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers. Welcome to our weekly virtual talk show, ACFIM Talks. Today, the 17th of December 2021. The year is fast spent, and I must tell you this before we start that you should be grabbing yourself a cup of coffee and hit that button, our Facebook page, our YouTube account, and all our Twitter account as well, so that you can be getting the notifications. And you can also be part of the conversation every time we are on the set discussing issues that are nothing other than money in politics. With me, I'm going to be introducing a guest, but before the guest comes on set, my name, as usual, is Felix Kafuma, the moderator for this virtual talk show. And once again, welcome to ACFIM Talks. Before we get started, for those of you who are just joining in and probably may not know the results for the LC5 Kayunga chairperson are finally out. You know, they went to the polls yesterday, and throughout the night, the tallying was happening, and now it is official that the NRM candidate Mwangi Andrew has defeated Nakwede Harriet, who was a NUP flag bearer, by a margin of about 500 votes. It's quite interesting, the figures. The candidate has managed to garner 31,830 votes against 31,308. There is a similarity in the figures here, so it's too much of a coincidence, but we all know, we were watching, we followed that election very, very closely, and I don't want to add more on it, but as we speak now, that news streaming in, the NRM candidate Mwangi Andrew has defeated the NUP candidate Nakwede Harriet. Remember, this position fell vacant when the NUP candidate then apparently died, and reports claim that he committed suicide. That aside, today we are discussing a very interesting topic around the political appointments, and this topic has been informed by early in the week when Museveni shuffled the ambassadors, and we wanted to have our say on this, but in the broader sense of how do we make sense of the political appointments. And when we looked at the list of those that were appointed ambassadors, in there were very interesting characters or individuals who, for political commentators, can argue that their political careers were on a down low. So the bigger question is, looking at how all these political appointments are managed and handled, are they more of a consolation gesture to political failures in Uganda? And we'll be discussing that topic today. I'm joined by Denis Musinguzi, who is a senior lecturer at Uganda Martyrs University. He has also been a consultant for over 10 years on aspects to do with governance, management, public policy, human rights, and development. Dr. Denis Musinguzi, you're welcome to ACFIM Talks.
Thank you so much, Felix. It is my pleasure to be here with you to talk about these very important issues that are affecting our country. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Once again, you can be part of this discussion by first of all, make sure that you are following us live on all our Facebook accounts, on our Twitter account, and also on our YouTube channel. And also, don't hesitate to ask any questions, to make a contribution, to also throw in your ideas to make this conversation very, very enriching. Let me start it this way. We had the list of ambassadors come out early this week. I think it was sometime last year. Yes, I think it was sometime either early this year or towards the end of last year, when we also had reshuffles within the RDCs. And I remember at that point we looked at the list. I think it was last year towards 2021 elections, and we looked at that list and we were trying to make sense of some of the names that came through as Uganda was heading into 2021 elections. And now again here another list of ambassadors comes out, and we are trying to dig deep into the names that have come through, but in a broader scheme of things, what this means in terms of the process being transparent, the process being devoid of any political innuendos. And for starters, Doctor, what is your take on this list? Very interesting names. Some of my the familiar faces there. Seeing Betty Gombe in that list, Lieutenant General Charles Angina is in that list. Seeing Nusrat Peru, who had a stint of politics. Arua is also on that list. I'm seeing my good friend Paul Amoru. I mean, a couple of interesting characters on that list. Former politicians. What do you make of this list, Doctor?
Yes, Felix, thank you for those introductory remarks. Yes, I had the opportunity of looking at the list. I've even followed some comments and discussions and, feelings about that list. As you've rightly put it, it's quite a mixed list. We have the traditional professional ambassadors who are up to the job, who through training, through experience, through what they have done before, they are able to measure up to the job. Incidentally, we also see on the list an increasing trend of political appointees or political ambassadors who traditionally are not professional ambassadors. I can't say for now that so and so is qualified, so and so is not qualified, but as I've said, it is a worrying trend when we are moving away from traditional ambassadors now to dealing with political appointees who are ambassadors. And some names, when you look at their experience from what they have done, you kind of get lost. Was this appointment motivated, by the desire and the purpose to serve, or there could have been other considerations that you and I may not be aware of? So it is a mixed list. There are people who are very competent, who have been into the foreign service, who have been into our foreign missions and have done some excellent work, but that number seems to be increasingly becoming smaller. And on the list, you see, as I've already said, people who are from the political space and have not necessarily been into the foreign and diplomatic missions. That's what I can say.
Wow, and yeah, because you are raising, it's more of a question of because ideally you're a career diplomat, and this is an area you enter into. You garner some skills on how to be a career diplomat, but now over time this space is being more of occupied. It's being occupied more of by political appointees, as you rightly put, but to a common person, because I understand when we discuss, for example, looking at ambassadors, to a common person, they're still trying to relate. What does this mean? How am I affected? How does it connect to my ordinary life? Before we come to that question of breaking down what this means, what is the danger in replacing career diploma with political appointments? Before we answer that question, ideally in a normal state, what could be the requirements and the conditions to determine who serves where in terms of being an ambassador?
Okay.
What are those considerations?
Okay, we are discussing politics, and we are talking about, political appointments and what this means and what is this heading to. Unfortunately, with time, we've come to associate politics as a dirty game. And that's what is in the mind of a common person. But essentially, politics is a means through which a country serves the interests of its citizens, whether it is in service delivery, whether it's in management of resources, whether it is in addressing conflicts that different groups are going through. That essentially should be the role of politics. Meaning politics, from a very positive sense, is itself a process, a system, a framework through which needs and interests of the people are served. And unfortunately, that essential space of politics has been increasingly hijacked by selfish motives and interests, whether institutional at the political organizations level or within individuals that are serving these political institutions. Now, bringing in the question you are asking, the consideration for appointing the ambassador should be, what is the role that they are going to serve? In conventional human resource practices, you do not employ someone because you have money, extra money, or because this is your long-term friend. You employ someone because there is work that is supposed to be done, and there is nobody doing it at the moment. So then you begin with the description of the kind of work that this person is going to do, and then you look at the required knowledge, skills, and experience, and you base on that to appoint someone. Now, with regard to ambassadors, we are operating in an international relations space. Yes. We have sovereign countries which are independent kind of units, but these increasingly interact with other sovereign nations in pursuance of common goods or common interests. These interests could be trade, it could be technology, it could be security, whatever the interest it is. Now, we belong to different geographical regions with different strategic, interests of the country. If you are sending someone to a region where we do a lot of trade, you need an ambassador who is going to be an anchor in that. Someone who understands it, who is in touch with whether the producers or manufacturers or service delivery. If you are going into a region where most of the interests are security or interests. So for me, the appointment of the ambassadors, yes, we have the national interests at stake, but in terms of strategic advantage, different geographical centers at the global level, we have specific interests in those particular places. So the appointment of ambassadors, therefore, should not be because someone contested for member of parliament and he was a good cadre, and because he did not go through, therefore, let us send him there for the sake of giving job. The underlying consideration should be, what are our national interests as far as this particular country or this particular region is concerned. Yes, overall ambassadors are playing the same roles, but the strategic consideration, in my opinion, should be the leading factor that we are looking at when we are appointing these people to these particular missions. Now, the danger of political appointments is that, the consideration is going now to shift from these fundamental strategic considerations into how far have these individuals supported the system at home. And in the event that they have not been politically accommodated because they have either lost an election or something else has happened, then a space, is created for them to begin serving the roles they are neither aware of nor even prepared to undertake. In fact, I think in 2018, I was private. I was speaking to, one of actors in the foreign space, and he said the list of the ambassadors at that time that had been proposed, almost half had received a letter of objection even from the countries where we had sent those ambassadors. So then the concern of the ambassadors is initially a national concern here, but it is also a concern of the recipient countries because they also have interests. And you realize that this person you've appointed may not be the right person. So if the recipient countries have reached at the level of rejecting some of ambassadors, then you can see that the appointment is reaching a crisis level. Why? Because we are deviating from the objective considerations of appointment, and we are looking into other subjective and selfish interests that are not serving the goals even of the countries that are involved.
Wow. You speak to something we call the animal we call patronage. And we're going to come to that. And before we unpack how patronage is subverting this process, probably let's start with that question, because I want to kind of like bring this discussion home. For now, it's still a discussion me and you and a couple of elites can follow. But the bigger question someone who is tuning in is like, okay, what's the loss? Why would I be bothered? What do I lose if it's political appointments and not probably a career diplomat, someone who is better placed to do foreign mission? But before we come to that question, let's first deal with the issue of patronage here, because you allude to the question of patronage. So are you referring to the fact that these appointments are as a result of patronage as a problem? And how is patronage actually influencing or playing a part in determining who is appointed where? Also considering RDCs.
The question of patronage has been in the public space for a long time in Uganda. And of course, by patronage, we are talking about a network of individuals, of institutions who have been mobilized and co-opted, to serve a particular purpose. Normally, that purpose, when it is not necessarily synchronized with our interests as a nation. So then when we are talking about patronage, we are talking about, the bloated appointments, whether it is cabinet, bloated appointment, whether it is districts, whether it is RDCs, whether it is, presidential advisors, humanly speaking, if you have over 100 advisors, what are they advising you on? What is your schedule of being advised? And you, the person who is being advised, do you have the time to think on your own? Or you are all the time, being advised? So when we talk about now the patronage, the danger of the patronage is, one, you divert from the broader interests of the country, whether it is education, whether it is market, whether it is labor export, whatever it is, then the attention goes to the patron. The word patronage comes from the patron. There is a patron on top you are serving. So the danger of patronage is that you begin serving the interests of the patron as opposed, to the interests and the needs of the particular country. And the other danger is that the patronage then becomes a problem because it constrains the resources of the country, so that these resources, which are supposed to be delivering services, which are supposed to be putting medicine in the hospitals, which are supposed to be improving the quality of universal primary and universal secondary education, which should be paying the interns who are on strike, this money goes into fueling and sustaining the patronage. And this is where an ordinary person begins to feel the debilitating or the deleterious effect of the patronage system. So it siphons resources from where they are strategically supposed to be spent, and now the resources will shift to make sure that the patronage is working. You alluded to the Kayunga election. Kayunga is a district that does not have a hospital, but a prime minister goes to that place for a week to mobilize for an LC5 chairman. If that money was given to the district, to buy ambulances and to build a hospital, it would serve better. LC5, the head of state, I've had people, computing how much that convoy spends on a daily basis. You are in a district where there are no services, where there is no hospital, there is no district hospital, where the education system is so down, but you are sending the ministers, you are sending the RDCs, you are sending so many of that infrastructure, and the money which was spent in Kayunga in the last, say, 2 or so weeks, if that money was given to the district, it would have done a lot. So that is another danger of patronage. Now, the underlying issue is, you want to co-opt as many people, whether from religion, whether from culture, whether from business, whether from what, and that diverts, the attention from the basic needs of the people, of the citizens, into the survival of those who are, seeking to retain certain political positions.
Wow. We are discussing political appointments. This discussion was triggered by the list that came out early this week concerning the appointments of ambassadors. And now we are bringing this discussion home, looking at also other appointments beyond just ambassadors, RDCs, and making sense of it, really, whether these appointments are for a national cause or they serve interests of the patron. And I'm with Dr. Musinguzi Denis, who is a senior lecturer at Uganda Martyrs University and governance expert and management, public policy, human rights. So we are basically having a very interesting discussion. On that issue, you've tried to break down why a common person should be concerned and why a common person should get involved in this. Now, how do you evaluate the performance of a political appointee? First of all, my understanding is that political appointee is sustained by taxpayers' money. So I'm a taxpayer, is serving my interests, ideally, of course. But in this case, the performance of ambassadors for us to have new ones, because I've seen a couple of new faces in the list. Actually, a number of them, almost half the number, they're new. What informs that this one should be dropped, this one should become an ambassador? And me as a citizen, how do I participate in this process? How do I, if I'm paying for these political appointees to go and serve my interests as a citizen of Uganda, how do I hold them accountable? And how do I participate in this process of probably having a say in choosing who goes where?
Yes, quite an interesting, question, which is an observation at the same time. At the governance level, we are guided by institutional and legal frameworks through which services are coordinated, including those who perform certain roles in the delivery of those services. For the ambassadors, we have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and should be the leading institution that is, evaluating and considering who is supposed to do what and serve where, whether they are serving those interests or not. With RDCs, they are presidential appointees, but they do not belong to the individual president. They belong to the institution of the presidency, which has a budget, which has, people working in that. But I think at the governance level, I think that has been, the main weakness as far as our government is concerned. Yes, there are provisions for monitoring the finances through the Ministry of Finance, through the performance, mechanisms. But when it comes to political appointees, they seem to be more to the mercy of the person or the office appointing them, as opposed, to being a mainstream public service concern. So the evaluation of the performance of the ambassadors should be, a responsibility of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The question can even extend how are ministers, evaluated and monitored in terms of their performance. When there is a cabinet reshuffle, is this reshuffle informed by, the performance of respective ministers, or it is triggered, by other considerations? Now, the biggest challenge, of course, for you to be able to monitor the performance and make an evaluation of whether the job is being well done or not, that's not where things begin. The things should begin from, what are the terms and reference of this person? What roles are they supposed to perform? What kind of deliverables are they supposed to be giving? And I think as a country, we have not... yes, there are policies and there are general policy goals and objectives, but how are these structured into performance, into actions, into expected deliverables and outcomes? I think that monitoring function is something that has been largely missing as far as our government and governance structures and systems are concerned. So the ordinary citizen should be able to know that if a minister of, say, health has been appointed and there is 2.7 trillion shillings that have been allocated to that particular sector for this financial year, I think what we need to go to, even in the first 2 weeks of passing the budget, these people should be coming back to say, of this money that we've received, we are going to do A, B, C, D. We shall do this in the first quarter, do this in the second quarter, do this in the third quarter. I think that is done at the government and the interministerial level. But to the ordinary person, we have the right of access to information. And I think that has also been one of the things that are not done as far as our government is concerned. Can we know right from the beginning of the finance year that the ministry of this has committed to do A, B, C, D in the course of the year? And if it is in the decentralized framework, then local governments should be, playing a role as far as this, the evaluation of performance is concerned. Unfortunately, we have gaps in terms of determining what is to be done, how it is to be done, what we are going to get out of this. Then we have a problem in communicating that information to the public, so the public remains, detached, because the ordinary citizens are going about their own survival. They are looking for food, they are looking for accommodation, they are looking for school fees for their children. These issues of, ambassadors, or it is something that is only an affordable luxury for them. They cannot afford that luxury of, doing that. And precisely this is where the role of civil society organizations, should be having a strong anchor, because the job of civilization is initially the job of government. The government institutions, as I said from the beginning, have the mandate of empowering and reaching out to the citizens, letting them know what they are doing and how they are doing it, bringing them into, when we talk about participatory approaches or the bottom-up approaches. And unfortunately, our policy frameworks, whether it is in the formulation or in the performance, they tend to be top-down. And by the time we go down, things have already run out of control. So then accountability becomes, a very difficult thing. That's why we complain about corruption. That's why we complain about collapsing buildings. That's why we complain about, promises that have not been delivered, whether it is in the construction of roads, blah, blah. So I think there is still something strong that needs to be done if we are to promote effective accountability. Of course, Felix, that accountability is at two levels. We have the horizontal accountability, which is within the government structures, either, to the Auditor General or to the internal audit system or to Parliament, blah, blah. But we also have, the vertical accountability, where individuals, organizations, the media, civil society should also be participating in that space. When civil society organizations, try to do that because they have the capacity, what we've been going through. Some of them are closed with unclear, reasons. So to me, it is an area that needs to be thought seriously and measures put in place to ensure that things are done in the right way.
Wow, this is interesting. I was trying to locate myself on, first of all, on how I can, as a citizen who is paying taxes, hold these ambassadors and RDCs accountable. We are going to go for a short break, and then when we come back, you would help us look at compare with other countries. What is the practice in other countries, and what are some of those things we can probably, if we indeed a progressive country that learns from others that are doing things better, we can pick from other countries concerning how such appointments should be managed, the framework, how should they be held accountable, how transparent the process can be. Are there countries that are doing it better than the way we are doing it? Because it looks like here, the most challenging thing or factor undercutting this process is the appointment, the power between the appointment and the appointee. That line of authority and which speaks to the patronizing we talked about. But when we come back after the break, we will go further and compare what's happening in other countries. Let's go for a break, and then we'll resume the discussions.
Hey,
Why are you running?
that sounds so crap.
When are you leaving my house?
I think just give me 1 month. Huh? Just 1 month. I strategize and when I'm able to relocate my family.
My dear, I have given you more than enough time. So your problem is relocating your family.
No, I need to relocate them, but also, of course, more time.
That
The
can
idea
be-
is
that can
give
be
me more
handled.
time.
That should be enough to settle you down.
Anyway, thank you.
What is he doing in my home?
I own this place now. Madam, you have 3 days to vacate.
What is the meaning of this, Nathan?
I'm sorry, Beatrice. I've sold this house.
Without my consent? I'll fight this madness.
No, Beatrice, please. Beatrice, please, Beatrice. That man is very connected. He's very powerful. Please, let's not go there. Besides, he has given me a check. We can start from here. We can really start from here.
But why? Why would you do such a thing?
Beatrice, I had politics, campaigns. I needed a lot of money to remain in the race.
You borrowed money from this money lender to run campaigns? Didn't I warn you from taking such a move?
We are unnecessary.
This doesn't concern you.
But I needed to save our parliamentary seat.
But you still lost. However much we invested.
I'll start from
We are worthy 5 million? Only?
Hey, big receipts. Receipts, man. In politics, you fall and rise. You fall and rise. You can lose an election.
So you believe you will rise again?
Yes, I can win again and become a parliamentarian and put my life back together. Would you write another one? Hey, Beatrice! Please, Beatrice! Please don't leave me.
Leaders like these are highly susceptible for political corruption and will not be service delivery oriented.
Contribute today at www.politicalfinanceafrica.org/donate.
Welcome back from that short break. We are still discussing political appointments and what informs political appointments. And before we went for a break, we had a question, and with me, I have very interesting panelist, Dr. Denis Musinguzi, who is a senior lecturer at Uganda Martyrs University, who is helping us to break it down and understand what goes into this process and what are the flaws and what is it that we can do to improve and make this process more accountable and transparent to those who finance it, I mean taxpayers. Now, before we went for a break, Doctor, I had picked interest because you've painted the picture of what happens in Uganda, and I can conclude authoritatively that I think in Uganda the process is a bit flawed. It has a lot of gaps comparatively across countries. You can even start with this region here where we are. What happens? How is this process managed and done in other countries? What are those things we can actually pick to improve our process down in Uganda?
Okay, Felix, of course, as I said from the beginning, the performance of the country is defined by the laws, by the policies, and by such frameworks. We have offices that have the mandate of appointing and the mandate of disappointing or removing some of the people who have been appointed. As I said, it is the broader national interests that should be governing the appointment of ambassadors, and in terms of accountability, it should be on whether the appointees or the appointed people are doing the right job or they are not doing the right job. I alluded to you earlier that there are some countries, and I have some examples, around 2018, who rejected some of the ambassadors that Uganda had appointed. Now, the decision by the country to reject an ambassador that has been, sent by a different country shows you that those people know what they are, and they are able to tell that with this kind of person that has been given to us, then our interests are not going to be realized. So other countries have some strong systems and mechanisms that demand for accountability right from the beginning. We have appointed you as an ambassador to this particular country. Our interests are A, B, C, D. And you're going there to become the link, to become the voice, to be the contact person. And ambassadors are very strong appointments. Traditionally, they used to be, you would hear concepts like ambassador plenipotentiary. Those plenipotentiaries have the powers even to decide on behalf of their countries. That's how powerful the role of the ambassador is or ought to be. Now, all the appointments for other countries will be, okay, there are other countries which are also doing bad, but for the countries which are clear as to what the ambassadors' roles are, as to what expectations do they need from them. Do we also have accountability, procedures in terms of Do we have, can we evaluate them on media or yearly basis to see whether we are moving in the right direction? Our neighbors, like a country like Kenya, they take the political ambassadors, quite seriously, because they have, strategic interests that they have in these particular individuals. And the recall will be on the basis of performance. If you've not performed, you clear the way so that someone else can occupy that seat and do, the right job. Now, we have to reflect as a country. Are we clear as far as our interests are? Do we have a set of demands that we place on these appointed individuals in terms of what they are supposed, to deliver for the country within a given period of time? Are our institutions strengthened enough, to monitor the performance of these ambassadors and be able to tell scientifically whether we are making progress as far as our interests are concerned? Now, tying this to the danger of political appointment, if you appoint someone so that it's a reward, they can be able to earn some money and live a good life, then you're moving away from the strategic interests and considerations of the country into serving other parochial and vested interests. Then even the question of accountability is going to be quite difficult, because this person has gone there, not necessarily to perform a given, set of objectives. Let me give a simple example. We've been complaining about labor export, especially maids and these domestic workers. And we've been concerned about, people dying in those foreign countries under very unclear circumstances. And you hear the whole government accusing the labor exporting countries, companies and organizations, as if they do not have a particular role. You do not hear that conversation, including our ambassadors in those particular countries, in terms of, how they are negotiating for the safety of the individuals. So we remain a detached, country. It's business as usual. Our citizens will work under horrible and terrible circumstances. We have an ambassador in that particular country. You hear the conversation is only on television with the media, which is investigating these people, sometimes rarely with the Ministry of Gender, which is trying to harmonize these things. They will say, we are in touch with those governments. Why should the Ministry of Gender be in touch with the government when we have an ambassador in that particular place? You get it? Because the Ministry of Gender has its own big pocket of things they are supposed to be doing here. But they have offices that are doing that. But I won't hear the Ministry of Gender saying, we have worked with ambassadors, we have held meetings with the country, and we are making ABCD progress. Unfortunately, these are things that are not common as far as our country is concerned. The best you will hear, we are in touch and the thing is going to be addressed. You do not hear of concrete steps that have been, taken and the kind of progress that has been achieved. So every time there is a complaint, it's like we are initiating for the first time. Every time there is a complaint, we are going to contact those people and address the issue. So it keeps recurring all the time. And we are not sure whether things are moving in the right direction or not.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. You can be part of this conversation on our on all our social media platforms, on our Facebook at ACFIM. You can also be a part of the conversation on our YouTube at ACFIM Uganda, including Twitter at ACFIM. Please, you can drop your comments and questions, and we should be able to address them, all raise them so that they can enrich this discussion. Doctor, you paint a picture which I think I also agree with. I don't know about my other colleagues out there that are listening in. The way the political appointments are managed, especially looking at how the appointments for ambassadors are managed, one can easily deduce or conclude that it's not an area where this government, at least by demonstration, takes very serious. First of all, if it is considered as a place where you reward or console political failures, actually let me use the word where you console political failures, then it means you are not necessarily investing so much in the foreign policy, or you do not necessarily consider this ambassadorial role very, very important. That's why you don't put so much time in thinking who you should appoint, and in terms of what are the interests and the priorities of the country concerning the foreign policy as explained or as expressed in the appointments. Would it be right to say that probably appointments, let me say, appointments for the ambassadorial position are of less significance to this regime?
Well, I think it is difficult to arrive at that kind of conclusion. You need to, have lots of facts and evidence from here and there. When you observe critically, there are certain countries, be it in America, I mean, some states in America or some countries in Europe, where we have had some kind of consistency as far as the placement of especially career ambassadors is concerned. Whether I mention New York, Washington, I mention, some countries in, but by and large, as we said right from the beginning, when the trend of career ambassadors is decreasing at the time when political ambassadors are on the rise, then there, yes, you can begin having that conversation that you're talking about. In making these appointments, what are, the basic considerations? Is it the priority of the country? So I think the whole process is going to be strengthened, is going to become more relevant, as I had mentioned earlier, when we agree that these people serve strategic national interests. When these interests, are identified from the beginning and turned into demands, that must be delivered by these particular individuals that have been appointed, that is a conversation that is not common in the public space. As far as what our ambassadors are doing out there, what are our strategic interests in this particular region? Are we making good progress as far as those interests are concerned? Or it all goes to individual as opposed to public interests, where for me, the appointee, I go there to live in a beautiful environment, get good salary and allowances, and say thank you to the person who appointed me, and up to a given time when the one who was appointed has changed their mind. So I think it is an area that also, as academicians, as civil society actors, we need, to research and interrogate and, have facts, more facts, and begin to engage. It's an area which is quite rich. When you look at the appointments, when you look at the manner in which the appointments are done, the quick reshuffles. For example, like these current appointments, I've had debates from Washington, D.C. They are quite frustrated, that the person who has been there has been doing a good job. They are not sure about the person that has been, if they are, consistent, reshuffles, you do not see a level of continuity, you do not see a level of seriousness. So I think it is an area that requires, a lot of generating evidence around it and understanding it a little more, so that then we can also become, part of a stronger conversation into how can we begin turning the tide. But yes, by and large, you don't seem to see a lot of importance attached to the ambassadors by and large, except in some particular places where there has been a level of continuity and as a level of, when you look at the people who are appointed to those particular countries, you gain some confidence that there is something going on. But,
Wow.
if after every election, you are having new appointees, and the appointees are not coming from the traditional expat foreign people, but they are coming from people who have been struggling in the constituencies and they are not coming through, then you grudgingly continue to lose confidence and you are not sure whether we are moving in the right direction.
Wow. Very interesting. And just to paint a picture of what we're talking about here, talk about strategic placements in terms of ambassadors. I've observed that the army, career security personnel have also been deployed. I'm seeing Major General Matayo Chaligonza to Burundi, and I want you to comment on some of those strategic deployments. I'm also seeing Major General retired Robert Rusoke to Kigali. Very interesting choice. Is the deputy ambassador there in Kigali. I'm also seeing Colonel retired Julius Kihanda in Rwanda. And then I also see another major somewhere. I'm seeing Colonel Fred Mwesige, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. What do you make of this? And I'm also seeing Major General retired Nathan Mugisha. What do you make of these appointments of especially of security people in specific countries? What should we read into this?
Yes, Felix, there has been a growing concern about what we call militarization, whether of democratic spaces, of political spaces, or civil service. So this has been, a growing concern. We have the army in the parliament. When URA was not doing good, we deployed the army, to do the clearance of. Now we hear it's the army technical wing which is going to be doing all the constructions. We are seeing the army in operation wealth creation. There has been,
army in cabinet.
There is that consistent and growing trend as far as entrusting our men and women, good officers in uniform, into managing some of these spaces. Now, of course, the main consideration is going to be, we have to acknowledge that within the army, there are professionals. We have lawyers, we have political scientists, we have, people who are highly qualified. And of course, there will be some places where, an ambassador, you require either a military person or, some kind of thing. I'm not going to discredit, that trend completely. My concern is two. On one hand, it is an increasingly worrying trend that even you begin imagining, okay, at the end, our president is no longer the president, and someone who is not a military person comes in, and you want to reform the civil service. Will you be able to say, okay, the military, we appreciate the role that you are playing, but we need career and more professional people to do this kind of work. So if they are in construction, they are in internal affairs, they are in operation wealth creation, they are going virtually into every space. So that growing trend, they are now getting into even the diplomatic, spaces. So it is that increasing trend which is worrying. Our constitution is telling us we are moving away from, regimes of high militarization of the rule of the gun and that kind of thing. And slowly we are entrenching, the same thing, although innocently it is either in public service spaces or in those diplomatic spaces. But for me, it is a trend which is of great concern. Because if eventually you have less, about half of the public service occupied by, people with military orientation, then at another moment it is going to become difficult to demilitarize, some spaces which should not be occupied by the military, people. And I'm raising that on the second level of concern. The more you deploy security-oriented people, the more you even begin using security-oriented approaches, even to what are essentially democratic concerns. Let me give 2 examples. You remember the walk to work.
Yes.
When you check with the Bank of Uganda, every election year, there is inflation because of the monies that, are dumped into the communities. And usually inflation goes high. That particular year where there was walk to work, inflation was hitting almost 50%. And there was shortage in the market. Now, that was a democratic concern which was raised by democratic, actors, who are saying there is something wrong. So then you would expect a democratic country to use democratic methods of dealing with that kind of a grievance. Through dialogue, through conversation and solutions on how it is going to be addressed. What do we see? Walk to work is instead securitized as a threat, and it is militarized, and instead of dialogue, we see people with guns and batons and mambas, solving what is supposed to be a democratic problem. Wow. We are talking about the issue of interns who are demonstrating. You hear a minister of health saying they are the ones who are going to lose. For heaven's sake, the government is not losing it. Is it a gain and lose? They have legitimate concerns about the working conditions, given the numbers that some people have died in the management of the coronavirus. They are asking for, for protection gears. They are looking for their allowances. And, someone, instead of addressing those things, instead is saying, when you compete with the government, we decide, and you are the one to lose. Is that the way we should be managing, these kind of affairs? When the medical doctors decide to walk to the parliament, to deliver their petition, they are countered brutally, mismanaged and mishandled. We saw the pictures of medical doctors kneeling down in front of 2-3 gun-wielding individuals whose ranks we cannot even know and understand. And that is where my worry is. That if you continue, militarizing civil service spaces, we are going to reach a moment where a response, to addressing even genuine concern is going to take a security, kind of approach. A security person, there is an enemy, and your approach is to get rid of that enemy. So then we begin looking at our own citizens as enemies instead of being, legitimate actors within the country. So for me, those are the 2 levels where I'm seeing a serious problem. It is increasing, and even the approach is changing.
All right, thank you so much. Very interesting conversation. I could hardly take stock of time, and I have under a minute to bring this to a close. I'll borrow 2 minutes, and those minutes are for your closing remarks. And in your closing remarks, the couple of questions that have come through, I'm going to pick at will. There was a question around, it's more of what can we do? So you'll wrap that up in 1 minute. And also, someone wanted to know whether there's a difference between strategic interests and national interests in relation to especially if we are discussing these appointments. If you can wrap those two questions in 2 minutes, that would help us to get out of here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Felix. It is coming to an end so quickly. Yes, when we talk about strategic interest, we are using the word strategy to show that those interests are important and they should be achieved. But essentially, these are national interests. But national interests are not just outlined in a paper or on a given, but we attach a strategic kind of view and approach and ask ourselves, if A, B, C, D are our interests, then how do we strategically move towards achieving these interests? And I was saying that even appointment should be the starting point towards achieving. So we need strategic appointment to put strategic, approaches to achieving these interests. But essentially, yes, these are national interests. I'm using strategic because they must be achieved. They should not remain on paper. Then, when it comes to what can we do, to achieve this, I think the whole conversation should go back to Uganda as an entity. Who are the stakeholders and what are their interests as far as the entity called Uganda is concerned? We have some stakeholders who have access to certain means, and they are using those means to disadvantage and exclude other stakeholders. So in the politics of exclusion and marginalization, that's where the problems are rising. If we are to reclaim our spaces, it is important to know that, yes, we are servants of the people. They are the stakeholders. They should be given some spaces where they are going to contribute to, whether it is development, whether it is human rights, we talk about the right to development. And our countries are making commitments, one, to allow space for citizens, one, to participate in the development process, to benefit from and even influence the development outcomes. So since we are talking about democracy, then we need to allow space for all the stakeholders to contribute to their own well-being, as well as the national well-being and the being of all of us.
Thank you so much. Be sure I'll bring you back, because looks like this conversation has left a number of things unhandled, and yet we have run out of time. Apologies to our viewers for overshooting. I had to allow the good doctor to give us a wrap on a couple of questions that were coming through on the screen. We've been discussing political appointments as this a consolation gesture to political failures in Uganda, and I was joined by Dr. Denis Musinguzi, a senior lecturer at Uganda Martyrs University, who is also a consultant and done a lot of work around governance, management, public policy, human rights, and development. And I also have been Felix Kafuma, and this is our last edition for this year, and this is why I wish you a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. See you in 2022. Stay safe. God bless. Bye-bye.